Afshin Molavi from the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. He's a senior fellow in their Foreign Policy Institute. I was speaking to Dennis Wilder, who was a national security advisor in the Bush administration, and he kind of broke it down this way, and I want to get your thoughts. He said competition can come in different forms. It can be a tennis match back and forth and kind of pleasant playing field, or it can be a boxing match where you're slugging it out. And it's really difficult to determine what we're going to see here. He tends to think tennis match, but I want to get your thoughts.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because whenever I think of these long-term strategic plans, I think of the great American boxer Mike Tyson, who once said that everybody has a plan, that is, until you get punched in the face, right? So you know, the punches are going to come flying, and I think what happens is with these kind of strategic plans is they lay out the broad framework, and the broad framework that the Trump administration has laid out is that there are strategic competitors. But what happens when the punch comes from maybe North Korea? What happens where the punch comes from somewhere where you actually need those strategic competitors? And I think that what happens is in the real world, you're often reacting to events more than looking long term. How
do you react when you're a country, though, when you see these mixed signals? Because you tend to see, and Roe kind of touched on this warmth between President Trump and President Xi, but then you see a more hawkish document coming out. I mean, one former Pentagon official said this lays out a roadmap to get in the game. I mean, this seems like a much more aggressive approach.
It does. And, you know, it seems thus far that, you know, President Trump seems to be governing by gut, by instinct, by, you know, looking at the personality of the individuals that he's dealing with. And there is kind of an emotion base to his foreign policy thinking. But what we saw here, this is what the national security establishment could agree on, essentially. That's what this document is. And the national security establishment, it seems, wants to see China as a strategic competitor, sees Russia as a strategic competitor, even if President Trump is not quite there yet.
It is difficult, though, to get back to what you were talking about. You do need allies, even people that you might see as potential adversaries, to help shape that global landscape. And you talked about the DPRK. Yeah. He's talked about engagement with Russia and China. How much more difficult does that become when you want to throw these punches, as
it does become more difficult, in fact. And you know, and the fact of the matter is that, you know, there's a lot of talk about the China trade deficit. And frankly, President Trump brings that up himself. But when you talk to corporate America, they understand the value of the China demand engine to the world economy. Look, after Mexico and Canada, China is the third largest recipient of U.S. exports. You know, tell that to Boeing that China is a strategic competitor. Tell that to hog farmers in Iowa that China is a strategic competitor because they're a major buyer of U.S. pork. Beef exports, soybeans, you know, consumer goods, you name it. American companies are selling to China, and that's a very important market for the U.S.
The collusion accusations, this cloud that hangs over Washington, give me your sense about the Putin-Russia elements of this strategic document.
You know, I think this is, you know, where there's a lot of tension because President Trump is still unwilling to point the finger at Russia. You know, there's a lot of, you know, smoke around, you know, this charges of collusion. You know, there's still the investigation still has to play out. But clearly, Russia has been an actor that has challenged the United States, has challenged the U.S. in Syria, has, you know, run over, the U.S. interests in Crimea and Ukraine and elsewhere. But President Trump, again, is not where his national security establishment is on Russia.
Interesting. Afshin Molavi, always a delight. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.